Hi everyone, I'm Mrs. Irvin and I'm here to continue our series on winter and exploring what's going on outside during the winter. And today I'm going to focus a little bit on a group of animals, and I want to first talk about, since it's so different outside, there's snow on the ground, it's cold out, there's not as much food. If you are an animal and you depend on eating insects that are flying around, you're going to have a hard time in the winter living here. So what do animals do to survive in the winter? So I bet you know what some of them do, but one thing that many birds actually do is they migrate. So they might fly to a place down south where it's warmer, where there's more food, and so that's how they actually deal with the winter. That's an adaptation. It's a behavior that helps them to survive. So migrating is something that they do. Not many mammals migrate. Caribou, way up in the Arctic, they have an area where they have their breeding ground in the summer, way up north, and then they move down into the lower into Canada. They're still up pretty north, but they travel for hundreds of miles and migrate. But not many mammals. It doesn't make sense for many mammals to do it because there's so much traveling across land, so it's a little harder than the birds. So, but migration is one way that animals deal with the winter. Another way is that they become sleepy and enter like a dormant or sometimes a true hibernation state where they are just breathing maybe once a minute. Their heartbeats is really slowed down. It's pretty amazing. Woodchucks are one of the true hibernators, and we'll talk about them sometime a little bit more because they're pretty fascinating. But they also are just in a den and they're sleeping right now in a state of hibernation. So we got migration, hibernation, and then the third thing is that some animals just stay active and they kind of just deal with living in the winter and right around here, and they are able to find food, and they have things that really help them to survive. So we want to explore that a little bit today. We're gonna work on a group that is really exciting to me. As we're gonna think about birds for a little bit. So today I'm gonna focus on birds in winter, and as I said before, you can go outside. You can look for birds that way. You don't really need any tools, your eyes, pencil, but there are, you might, at some point you might learn to use this. These are binoculars. That's a way to be able to see an animal or a bird that's far away. But you don't need these binoculars at all, but it's something to kind of think about. It's actually a hobby called birding, or you're a birder or you're a bird watcher. So you might get interested in this. There's thousands and thousands of bird watchers. It's a whole community of people that just love watching birds. And there's something exciting coming up in a couple weeks. It's called the Great Backyard Bird Count. And that is sponsored by some people who really love to kind of monitor birds and make sure that the bird population is staying safe. And that is people at Cornell University, which is a college like UNH, but it's in New York State, and then the Audubon Society. And so in the middle of February, this Great Backyard Bird Count is happening. And what you do is you can sign up for the app. Your parents can, if they want to get involved, they could. And you just go out for 15 minutes and you see birds. You count how many birds you see, and then you enter it into the app. And that's a way for us to keep track of all the birds in the world and what kind of birds are doing well and what kind of birds might be not as abundant as they used to be. So they kind of monitor it that way. So that's just a little aside, but I just wanted to tell you about that because I'm going to get involved in that. It's a way to be a citizen scientist and just kind of contribute. So as I talked about in the earlier video, if you want to go outside, remember, bundle up, scarves, hats, gloves, boots, everything. Or if you can't get outside, sometimes there's a storm where it's just too cold, you can always just sit at your window. And all the pictures, pretty much most of the pictures I'm going to show you today were taken from inside my house. So I have a bird feeder. You don't have to have a bird feeder because birds are sometimes going to many times they're at other areas. There might be some berries or things outside that they're eating. So you can go out and find a place where you think something that you think might be something that birds would like to eat, and you can watch that area. If you have a bird feeder, that's another thing where you can kind of sit in a chair inside if you want. You can sketch with your pencil and paper and make a nature journal page. So these are just some suggestions. I'm just going to talk to you about a few of these birds, and I hope that you can make a nature journal page focusing on the birds in winter, the birds that you see right now. This is the black-capped chickadee. They're pretty fun to study and observe in the winter. There's often quite a few around. They usually form flocks of about 6 birds that you might see kind of hopping or flying around together. They have favorite feeding areas, and they will kind of gather at those sites. They call them foraging sites. And they'll defend them from other flocks. So they'll try to keep the food to themselves. They also have a favorite roosting area where they sleep and return to every night. It's often in dense evergreen trees. They're incredible acrobats. They really can hop around on top of branches, and they can just as comfortably hang below a branch. So they're pretty fun to watch. In winter, they often eat insect eggs or larvae that might be stored in the crevice of a bark of a tree, and they also eat seeds from pine trees and hemlock trees. So look out for the chickadee. They're pretty fun to watch. This is another fun bird. This bird is called a blue jay, and they're kind of noisy birds at certain times of the year. They can sound an alarm with their calls. When it sees you walking up or near them, it might advertise your presence to one of its friends or family members. They're kind of aggressive food gatherers, so they're really interested in getting a lot of food. And they're one of the birds that actually sometimes store food in the trunks of trees, often to eat just minutes later. So scientists are very interested in what's going on with this behavior. So as you're watching a blue jay, you might want to try and make some discoveries about what they're actually doing. And if you see them ever gathering food, or if you see them storing it, it might be interesting to kind of write down and let others know about. So that's another really pretty bird that you can see at your feeder, or you can see when you're just out walking around. This is the cardinal. This is another fun bird to watch in the winter. The male and the female look quite different. We're looking at a male right now. They have this real bright colored red, and then the females are a kind of a lighter color, gray, brown. They have a little bit of red in them. They're also very beautiful, but it's kind of fun because you can tell which one is the male and which is the female. Another thing that's really interesting, that scientists have studied the cardinal and have shown that they often don't leave the area where they're born. So these cardinals you're seeing were born pretty close to where you see them. They really don't travel very much at all. They also form flocks of 12 or even more that stay and feed together. And then in the second half of the winter, which is actually right about now, the males begin singing to the females. And in late winter, so in a little while, the females will answer, and then they'll kind of pair off into male and female pairs, and the flock kind of breaks up. So that's kind of fun to watch for if you see any males starting to sing to the females. And another thing that's interesting is that they have this very large bill that's a great adaptation for breaking up large seeds. And you can see them sometimes take a sunflower seed, split it in half, and then they eat the kernel inside. They also eat seeds from the sumac. You'll see sumac are those bright red berry-looking kind of clusters of berries on trees, and they like to eat those. So it's kind of fun to watch the cardinal and try and spot which one's the male and which is the female, and to try and think about what are those things that are helping this cardinal survive during this very kind of cold and hard time of year. These birds are goldfinches, and they are brightly colored yellow in the summer when they're during the breeding season, and they molt and lose that bright yellow color right before winter, probably as an adaptation to hide a bit from predators. They are able to eat grass and weed seeds that are out in the fields, so they're able to find those seeds for food. They're also really fun to watch fly. They have an interesting flight pattern where they kind of swoop down and then fly up again. But these are also pretty fun birds to watch in the winter. And this is a pretty funny sight in my yard. Here are some turkeys that are running down the hill. They're a little bit scared of me, and I also, after watching them for a little bit, I noticed their tracks. So that's another thing I might draw in my nature journal page. They've got very interesting tracks in the snow here. This beautiful bird is the dark-eyed junco, and many of these birds come down from the north to spend the winter here in New Hampshire. And they've studied them, and some of these same birds come to the same place every year. So the ones you're seeing in your yard may be the same ones that came down from up north, Canada, or one of those areas. The same ones are returning to the same spot each year. They love to eat seeds like ragweed seeds, so you might have some seeds in a field nearby that they're eating, or maybe they're eating at your bird feeder. As you're studying winter birds, you might want to notice to see if any birds sit together like these two. I was watching the cardinal and the dark-eyed junco spend some time together. See if you see other kinds of birds interact with each other. It's just interesting to watch. This is a downy woodpecker, which is a bird that often pecks at bark to get insect eggs or insect larvae in the winter. Here it's getting some seeds for the bird feeder, so sometimes we do see woodpeckers at our bird feeder. This is a male, you can tell because it has red on its head, and this is the female that just is white and black. The tufted titmouse is a gray bird with kind of a funny head, and they have kind of this buff brown sidings, but they're very pretty and fun to watch in the winter time. They often come to a feeder, or they might be hopping around on the snow. They form flocks in the winter that are families, so they're made up of parents with their young, and then in the springtime the young will often leave the family and become a part of a new family that they'll form. They eat insects in the summer, and then in the winter they gather acorns, beech nuts, and berries, and that's kind of fun to think about. This is the white-breasted nuthatch, and nuthatches are the only birds that can climb up and down trees, which might give them an advantage of finding insects in bark. Their main food in the winter is acorns and hickory nuts, and what's fun about them is they stay in the same area for the summer and the winter, so often they keep the same mates year after year. And now it's your turn to check out winter birds and see what you can observe and notice and wonder. Enjoy!